Welcome to a Big Bite of Apple with Daniel Black.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to a Big Bite of Apple. I'm your host, Daniel Black. And, so, this is episode number 3 of this wonderful podcast that I hope everyone who has been listening and, listening to these podcasts have enjoyed it. And, I'm just going to tell you this before I continue on with this show. I recorded this show, and something happened with the mic, something happened with the recording, so now I had to restart, and right now would be the, email portion of the show, but, I have no emails, so, looks like we're going over to the eBay finds. I'm so popular, I have no emails. But if you do want to email me a question, or a recommendation, or a comment, or anything, spread the love here. You can send me an email at bigbiteofapplepodcast@gmail.com. And just letting you know, bite is spelled B-Y-T-E. Clever me. bigbiteofapplepodcast@gmail.com. So let's start off with today's eBay finds. We're going to start off with a nice one here. A vintage Macintosh SE 800K hard drive, 1 megabyte of RAM. This is ending on January 19th, and it has a starting bid of $19.99. Try to find another one here. Well, this is definitely... Oops, whoops, I actually reviewed that, and I actually showed you that in the last episode. Okay, here's this. Macintosh Plus 1 megabyte system model 80081A with keyboard and mouse. It also ends on January 19, 2012, and it has a starting bid of $475. Let's take a look at this. This is not a computer, but I know this is something that I know a lot of people would love. An Apple Store employee shirt. The size is extra small, and it ends on January 15th, 2012, and the starting bid is at $19.99, and the price is $24.99. Something happened to eBay here, so I guess that's your eBay finds of the day, and that's your eBay finds of the day, and we'll come up with Apple news right after this break.
The Big Bite of Apple podcast is brought to you in part by myapplespace.com, a little space for the rest of us.
Welcome back to the podcast, A Big Bite of Apple. And where we left off, we were looking up some Apple news. The wonderful segment in the show where we look up some Apple news. And, so, yeah. So let's go over to Apple Insider, see if there's any wonderful news stories over here. And here's something interesting. If you listen to episode 1 of the podcast, you were hearing me at the very end talking about an interview that John Scully said about the Steve Jobs biography. Well, here's another thing about John Scully from AppleInsider.com called former Apple CEO John Scully says he never fired co-founder Steve Jobs. Here we go. Former Apple chief executive John Scully had said in recent interviews that the late Steve Jobs was never fired from the company he helped found, an assertion that runs to counter the Jobs' own public claims on the matter. Scully, who was president of Pepsi before being recruited to Apple by Jobs himself in 1983, has become notorious as the man who ousted the co-founder, but the former CEO claims he never actually fired Jobs. He said as much in 2 recent interviews, one with the BBC and another with computer historian David Grealish, as transcribed by the Mac Observer. Jobs originally convinced Scully to leave Pepsi with the famous line, "Do you want to sell sugar water for the rest of your life, or do you want to come with me and change the world?" He was brought on for his marketing experience because Apple's board of directors reportedly viewed Jobs as too young to be CEO. Jobs originally convinced... Oops, I just read that line. At the outset, Scully and Jobs worked well as partners, but they soon came to disagree on Apple's strategy with its Apple II and Macintosh product lines. Scully said the first reason he had been brought on was to keep the Apple II commercially successful for at least 3 more years, in order to buy time for Jobs to create the launch of Macintosh. The second reason Scully was recruited for the role was because Jobs wanted Apple to learn how to market computers the way Scully had marketed Pepsi with the Pepsi Challenge campaign. John Scully said this. Jobs and I spent months together getting to know one another, probably almost 5 months. Weekends, I'd go to California, he'd come to New York, and so forth. And in those discussions, I was trying to teach him what I had learned at Pepsi about marketing. One of the key insights we learned was that you don't sell the product, you sell the experience. Scully said he and Jobs were completely aligned in terms of what they were and what their roles were. But when the Macintosh Office flopped at their launch in 1985, their relationship became strained. As we moved out into March 1985, the Macintosh sales were not doing well, and Steve and I started to have major disagreements on what we should do about it, Scully said. Steve wanted to lower the price of the Macintosh, and yet he still wanted to run substantial advertising behind the product. He wanted to de-emphasize the Apple II, and you can read the rest of that on appleinsider.com. So let's see if there's anything else. Let's go to Cult of Mac. Everyone needs to have a Cult of Mac or 2 story in there. And let's go to another CES story. And this is by Cult of Mac. Here we go. The most talked about gadget at CES was probably... well, it was not an Apple product, this ultra-cool Fuji camera. My colleagues here... oops, I'm talking... okay, here we go. Okay, here we go. Even the very air at CES seemed to be pulsating with the word Fuji. Of course, they were all talking about this enigmatic, I think that's it, neo-retro Fuji X Pro 1. This camera isn't for everyone. This is a prototypical enthusiast gadget, not really a daily driver. It's a Shelby Cobra, not a Honda Accord. In other words, it's stylish, difficult to live with a blast to drive, and expensive. How expensive? Fuji isn't sure, but they told me it will probably be around $2,000, and that's just for the body. Then again, the X Pro 1 is stacked with some deliriously cool features. It's a compact, mirrorless camera that uses interchangeable lenses, like the Micro Four Thirds system outfits such as Olympus and Panasonic use, but unlike the smaller sensor of the 4/3, the Fuji has a larger APS-C sensor, the same size as those used in prosumer Nikon DSLRs, and Canon uses a very similar version. You can read the rest there at cultofmac.com. And that was your Apple news and CES news of the day. I hope you enjoyed this episode of A Big Byte of Apple, and I'm Daniel Black saying see you next time.
This has been a Big Byte of Apple podcast, episode 3. I hope you all have enjoyed it. See you next time, and thank you for listening.